All right, switching things up just a little bit here. Now we've got Dr. Joel Conn for his, I guess, bi-monthly or twice monthly visit here with Ask the Vet. Good morning, Dr. Conn.
Good morning.
To see you again here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What do you got for us this Monday morning?
So I get a lot of questions from clients about how to read and interpret a pet food label, and specifically they kind of want my advice on what products to buy. So there's some interesting rules that apply to pet food labels that are regulated by the FDA, and everything I'm going to talk about today, if you Google FDA pet food labels, you can find it on there. So the first rule, there's actually 4 main rules here. Okay. The first rule is called the 95% rule. So these usually are going to be simple names like tuna food for cats or beef food for dogs. And what this means is that the ingredient listed has to make up at least 95% by volume of that food.
Okay.
And that includes water, so it may actually be a little bit less than 95%. So this is usually going to be canned foods, things like that. And the reason this is important because the very next rule is called the dinner rule or the 25% rule. So if it's followed by a modifier, such as dinner, entree, nuggets, formula, something like that, so a food that says tuna formula for cats, it only then has to contain 25% of the ingredient listed. So if you're comparing product to product, that can make a huge difference. And you know, if you have an animal that has a food allergy, say your dog is allergic to lamb, and so, you know, you would think kind of intuitively, then if you find a food that says beef dinner for dogs, you'll probably be in good shape. But it only has to contain 25% beef, and in fact, lamb may be in there. It may even be a higher percentage than the food that's on the label.
Would that be on the label, though? If
it should be in the ingredient list.
Okay,
so you need to read that ingredient list. The third rule is called the with rule, and if the ingredient is preceded by the word with, it only has to contain 3% of that ingredient. So if you have a dog food that says dog food with cheese, it only has to contain 3% cheese. And then the final rule is called the flavor rule. So if it has the modifier flavor after the name, beef flavored food for dogs, it doesn't have to contain any beef. There's no requirement at all. So if you're looking at this now and you have 2 foods on the shelf, one says beef food for dogs and the other one says beef flavored food for dogs, you would think these are probably fairly comparable. But in actuality, the first food probably has to contain at least 95% beef. The second food may not have any beef in it at all. So how foods are labeled can be a little bit sneaky, a little bit tricky. You need to really carefully read that label and make sure you look at the ingredient list. Speaking of the ingredient list, though, they can get a little bit tricky there, too.
Just like regular people food, right?
Just like anything. So every food now is labeling, you know, chicken as our first ingredient. Well, there's ways to do that. So the ingredient list, you have to list everything by volume in the food.
Makes sense.
But there's no rule that requires that can't be broken up into different subcategories. So if actually corn is your main ingredient, you could actually list it as cornmeal, corn powder, corn gluten, or what have you, thereby breaking it up into separate components and making those ingredients individually smaller. Now chicken rises to the top of the list. So make sure you read the entire ingredient list when you actually go through that. Because, you know, it is kind of sneaky. The other thing...
And is that to kind of confuse the consumer? What's your opinion on that?
It's, you know, a food company their goal is to sell their food, right? So what's happened is the FDA has actually made certain standards where they have to follow these rules when they label the food so that they can't deceive their customers. So actually these are strict rules. The problem is most people don't know about them. So I don't think that companies are intentionally trying to deceive them, but you know, if they can make their food sound better than maybe it is, they're going to do that. You know, they're in the business to make money. And then finally, you know, there's lots of things about natural foods or organic foods. So the word natural in the pet food world has no meaning at all. It's not regulated.
Just like in the human world.
That's right. So just because it says natural doesn't necessarily mean that there's any improvement in those ingredients listed. And organic, unlike in the human world now, that's actually starting to become a little bit more regulated.
It is,
Not regulated in the dog world. So something that says organic really doesn't have to prove anything. Now we hope that a lot of these companies are ethical and they make, you know, they put these labels on because they're true. And in many cases that is going to be the case, but just be really careful how you interpret.
Be careful, and I'm sure just research, and if you have any questions, ask a vet like yourself.
Yeah, and we can help you with that, and there's resources available for every company that will go into detail about what that food offers.
Sounds good. Dr. Joel Conn, we appreciate you stopping by this morning from the Pismo Beach Veterinary Clinic. If you have any questions regarding this or anything else, ask the vet at KCOY.com. We'll see you back here in a couple of weeks.
Thanks for having me.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.